there is something most people never stop to think about. When civilizations fracture and supply chains fail, the items that ignite conflict are not weapons or gold. They are mundane household objects. Things you have seen 100 times without registering their true value. Things that cost less than a cup of coffee right now, all sitting on shelves completely ignored. Once the system breaks down, those same objects become currency, leverage, and the reason people lose their composure in public places. This is not a fear piece. It is a reckoning with documented reality. History has shown us, repeatedly and without exception, that preparation is the only rational response to systemic vulnerability. Governments fail to deliver and infrastructure collapses. Individual readiness becomes the single deciding factor between stability and desperation. The gap between those two states is not filled by wealth or status. It is filled by foresight and practical action taken in advance. Follows is a documented breakdown of the items most likely to trigger conflict among unprepared populations. These are not theoretical scenarios constructed for entertainment. They are drawn from real disasters, observed human behavior under pressure, and real institutional failures that left populations scrambling for basic necessities. Every item here has a documented history of becoming scarce, contested, and disproportionately valuable during prolonged emergencies. Study this list, act on it deliberately and without delay. Because the window between affordable and available and completely unavailable closes faster than anyone anticipates or wants to believe. 1. Sealed, empty, gallon-sized water containers. Water is the foundation of survival. Without it, every other preparation becomes irrelevant within 72 hours. Most people understand this at a surface level. They stock bottled water. They install filters. They talk about rain catchment systems and underground cisterns. Almost no one adequately addresses the most immediate logistical gap in a water crisis: the storage containers themselves. Municipal water systems shut down during a large-scale emergency. Communities must suddenly transport and store water independently. It requires food-grade, sealable containers, not buckets, not plastic bags. Repurposed laundry detergent bottles. Purpose-built, gallon-sized jugs with airtight, secure caps designed to prevent contamination during transport and storage. During Hurricane Harvey's catastrophic aftermath, distribution stations across Texas set up water access points at fire stations and community centers. The lines stretched for hours in the summer heat. Many people waiting in those lines had no containers whatsoever. They arrived with their hands outstretched, hoping somehow to carry water back to their families. Others arrived with trash receptacles, rinsed detergent bottles, and compromised containers that could not safely hold potable water under any reasonable standard. The individuals who had clean, sealed gallon jugs were immediately differentiated from the crowd. Stores had sold out of those jugs days before the storm even made landfall. The Federal Emergency Management Agency consistently emphasizes proper water storage in its emergency preparedness literature and public communications. Just water quantity, but vessel quality and integrity. Contamination happens during transport and storage, not just at the source. A cracked or chemically compromised container can render perfectly safe water unusable within hours, creating a false sense of security that is arguably worse than no water at all. Here is the specific advantage of gallon jugs that extends beyond basic hydration. They are multi-use tools with overlapping utility. Fill them before an outage hits, using clean tap water while the system still functions. Freeze them in advance to extend refrigeration during blackouts, using them as ice blocks before their water contents become necessary. Use them to portion and ration water carefully for multiple household members with different needs. Stack them efficiently in tight spaces without wasted volume. Their collapsible counterparts exist and have merit, but standard rigid plastic gallon jugs are significantly cheaper, more widely available, easier to seal reliably, and more familiar to distribute among group members. Panic purchasing begins. People move first to bottled water. Within hours, that is completely gone from retail shelves. Then they move to the containers themselves. The fights begin at that second stage, because by then the need is visceral and immediate, and social inhibitions begin to dissolve under genuine desperation. A parent who cannot store water for their children does not negotiate calmly or yield gracefully. The action step is straightforward and inexpensive. Buy a case of empty food-grade gallon jugs now. Label them clearly. Keep them sealed and stored flat or stacked in a dry, cool space away from chemical exposure. This is a $10 to $15 investment that could represent survival-level infrastructure when water systems fail in your area. 2. Bulk pump-style liquid soap dispensers. In stable times, a pump bottle of soap sits completely unnoticed on a bathroom counter. In a crisis environment, that same object represents functional disease control infrastructure for your household and your community. After major disasters, public health deteriorates with alarming speed. The initial threat is often the disaster itself, in whatever form it takes. The secondary threat, which historically kills more people than the primary event, is contagion spreading from compromised sanitation. Crowded emergency shelters, compromised water supplies, disrupted waste management systems, and collapsed hygiene infrastructure create ideal conditions for disease transmission. Hand hygiene is the single most effective and accessible intervention against this transmission pathway, requiring only soap, minimal water, and a functional delivery mechanism. Following Hurricane Katrina, shelters across Louisiana and Mississippi reported outbreaks of norovirus and acute respiratory infections within days of opening their doors to displaced residents. CROSS and FEMA workers at multiple sites attributed these outbreaks, at least partly, to inadequate soap availability and zero functional dispenser systems. Responders improvised hand-washing stations using buckets and ropes with bars of soap attached. It was not effective at scale, and the disease spread reflected that inadequacy. Critical insight here is not just the soap itself. It is the delivery mechanism that makes soap distribution practical for groups under stress. Bar soap becomes contaminated rapidly when shared among multiple people in emergency conditions. Containers of liquid soap create bacterial growth and cross-contamination issues. A sealed pump dispenser solves both problems simultaneously, controls dosage with each use, prevents cross-contamination between users, and functions entirely without electricity or running water. Most people do not consider when thinking about emergency hygiene is that pump dispensers are simply not something survivors instinctively stock in advance. Stock sanitizer. They stock disinfecting wipes. They stock food and water in quantity. Dispenser mechanism, the tool that makes soap distribution practical at group scale, gets overlooked until the moment everyone simultaneously realizes they need it. During large-scale emergencies, cleaning product aisles are stripped bare within 24 to 48 hours of confirmed crisis conditions. Sanitizer and wipes disappear first within the initial hours. Remains on shelves gets taken next, including the dispensers themselves. The person who prepared 3 or 4 sealed, refillable pump bottles in advance has something of immediate and practical community value. In shelter environments, functional dispensers become community assets that people actively negotiate over and trade for. Stock a minimum of 4 pump dispensers as part of your baseline preparation. 2 should be preloaded with liquid soap. 2 should be sealed and empty, ready for refill when needed. Pair them with a gallon container of concentrated liquid soap that can be diluted and used to refill dispensers repeatedly. The total investment is under $20. And the disease prevention value during a prolonged crisis affecting multiple people is genuinely immeasurable. Item 3. Foil and vapor barrier sealing tape. Standard duct tape has its place in any emergency kit. It is not engineered for the specific conditions that prolonged collapse scenarios create or demand. Temperatures plummet, windows crack under structural stress, and thermal insulation becomes a moment-to-moment survival priority. What people desperately search for is foil-backed or vapor barrier sealing tape. This is specialty tape designed specifically for vac sealing applications, vapor barrier installation in construction, and high-performance thermal insulation work. Bonds securely to surfaces that standard adhesive tape cannot grip under stress. Resists moisture penetration, temperature extremes in both directions, and sustained air pressure. In normal construction contexts, it keeps buildings energy efficient and weatherproof over decades. In a survival context, those same properties keep people alive through dangerous conditions. During the catastrophic Texas freeze of February 2021, millions of households lost power simultaneously in sub-zero temperatures that the infrastructure was completely unprepared to handle. People who had foil or vapor barrier tape available could seal broken window frames effectively, patch gaps exterior walls that were bleeding heat, and secure heavy plastic sheeting over drafty openings and doorways. Those without it used newspapers, towels, clothing, and other improvised materials to block drafts with dramatically less effectiveness. The thermal difference between those two approaches was significant and measurable. In extreme cold conditions, that thermal difference can determine whether people survive the night. Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico, this tape appeared in an unexpected range of roles that demonstrate its versatility. Residents used it to seal water tank lids against contamination, reseal opened emergency ration packaging for extended storage, and reinforce makeshift roof patches on storm-damaged structures. Its combination of strength and moisture resistance made it substantially more effective than standard alternatives in the wet, chaotic conditions following the storm. Hardware stores typically carry limited quantities of this specific tape. Not a high-volume retail product, and store managers do not prioritize its stock levels the way they do consumer staples. Demand spikes suddenly and dramatically. Those limited shelves empty within hours of people understanding what they need. 2 rolls now. One belongs in your primary toolkit. One belongs in your emergency go-bag. The 60-foot rolls available at most hardware stores can seal a significant portion of a small home's thermal vulnerabilities in a single focused session. If this information is adding real value for you, take 3 seconds right now, hit like, drop a comment with what you would add to this list, and subscribe. It helps more people find this content before they are in a position where they desperately need it. Item 4. Unprinted canvas drop cloths. Walk through any hardware store and you will see them folded on a shelf near the paint and supplies section. Canvas drop cloths. Heavy, plain, and completely unremarkable to most shoppers. People pass them without a second glance because they have a single obvious association: protecting floors during painting projects. In a collapse environment, they are arguably one of the most versatile and practically valuable survival assets available for under $20. The versatility is what makes them exceptional. A single item that serves 10 distinct functions is fundamentally more valuable than 10 single-purpose items that together cost far more. Canvas is fundamentally different from plastic sheeting or standard tarpaulins in ways that matter enormously under crisis conditions. It is breathable, which prevents dangerous condensation buildup in enclosed spaces where multiple people are sheltering. It is durable under sustained stress, resisting wind, abrasion, and physical load far better than plastic alternatives. It is quiet when moved or adjusted, an often overlooked advantage when maintaining a low profile during civil unrest, or when trying not to disturb sleeping family members. It is washable and genuinely reusable across multiple purposes and multiple emergencies. The applications during a crisis scenario are extensive and practical. Use them as ground insulation in temporary shelters to prevent critical heat loss through direct floor contact. Hang them as dividers in crowded shared spaces to create semi-private zones for families or individuals. Place them over windows as blackout covers that block light from attracting unwanted attention, or as draft barriers that reduce heat loss. Use them as sleeping surface protection against damp ground or contaminated floors. Set them as windbreaks in partially enclosed outdoor shelters. Vehicle interiors for insulation during cold weather sheltering. FEMA and Red Cross temporary shelters routinely rely on canvas-type materials specifically for space division in crowded facilities. Gymnasium or community center shelters housing hundreds of displaced people. The ability to create semi-private zones is critical for psychological health, for separating sick individuals from healthy ones, and for maintaining basic human dignity under difficult conditions. During the COVID-19 pandemic, hardware stores across multiple regions reported canvas drop cloth selling out as people constructed home isolation spaces for symptomatic family members, demonstrating that this application is well within civilian awareness and capability. The unprinted specification is not cosmetic. Canvas that has been dyed or chemically treated with printed patterns may contain compounds that release under heat, combustion, or sustained contact with skin. Printed, untreated canvas is safe for all of these applications, including direct skin contact and use near open flame in controlled settings. Plastic tarps are gone, and they will be among the first items to disappear from hardware stores. The person with canvas has already resolved that particular resource competition in their favor. 2 or 3 now. Roll them tightly. Store them in a dry waterproof bag. They weigh almost nothing individually, take up minimal storage space, and cover more potential survival applications than nearly any other single item at this price point. 5. Tall rubber plant pots, 2 to 3 gallon size. This one surprises most people when they first hear it. It takes a moment to follow the logic. Consider what this item actually represents when viewed through a survival lens rather than a gardening lens. When systems fail and conventional supply chains stop functioning, containers become critical infrastructure. Every prepper knows to stock 5-gallon buckets. Prepper stores plastic bins and storage totes of various sizes. Those conventional containers disappear from retail shelves very quickly once word spreads that a major disruption is underway or imminent. People consistently fail to consider are the tall rubber plant pots, stacked unassumingly in the garden section, overlooked by shoppers focused on more obvious emergency supplies. These pots are engineered specifically to hold significant weight and volume over extended periods without cracking, warping, or structurally failing. They are flexible enough to survive physical impacts and compression stresses that would shatter rigid plastic storage containers. They are stackable, which makes both storage in advance and transport during a crisis logistically efficient. And because they are not immediately associated with survival preparation in the public consciousness, they remain available on store shelves considerably longer than conventional emergency containers. The drainage holes that define their original horticultural function are trivially simple to seal for alternative uses. Piece of waterproof tape, a cut plastic disc, or a folded cloth layer converts them into functional liquid or bulk dry goods storage in minutes. Adequately sealed, they can hold potable water for transport, dry grains and legumes, fuel in small quantities, or any bulk material requiring a rigid, portable vessel. Post-earthquake disaster response in Haiti and the response operations following the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami demonstrated repeatedly that any durable, sealable container becomes a highly valued community resource in the immediate aftermath of a major event. Aid workers utilized whatever was available in the local environment. In Venezuela's extended economic collapse, urban families used plant pots on apartment balconies to grow food crops, trading that fresh produce for other essential goods. In that context, the pots themselves carried independent trade value beyond their contents. Beyond their primary storage function, these pots serve important secondary roles in group survival contexts. In shelter environments, they function effectively as seating when inverted and stacked. They serve as waste management vessels when lined with appropriate materials. Can be converted into functional hand-washing stations with minor modification to their structure. Their rigidity and tall profile make them more practical than soft-sided bags for carrying mixed supplies over short distances. 6. Large count disposable cutlery packs. When water becomes genuinely scarce, dishwashing stops being a convenience concern and becomes an active health risk. Logic is straightforward and hard to argue with. Washing dishes requires water in meaningful quantity. Dishes washed inadequately with insufficient water harbor bacteria and viral material. Reusing inadequately cleaned cutlery during outbreak conditions accelerates disease transmission through the exact population already under stress. You cannot safely wash reusable cutlery, disposable options become the only sanitary alternative available. After Hurricane Maria devastated Puerto Rico's infrastructure in 2017, FEMA field kitchens operating at distribution scale ran through thousands of plastic utensils each day. Resupply logistics were inconsistent and frequently delayed. Field workers rationed forks and spoons by count during peak distribution periods. People ate from cans using improvised implements when cutlery ran out. Those who arrived at distribution points carrying their own personal utensils had both an immediate practical advantage and a recognizable trade commodity within the informal exchange systems that formed rapidly. During the early months of COVID-19 lockdowns in urban areas where water pressure and availability had been affected, disposable utensil packs moved faster off grocery shelves than most anticipated. Not because people were suddenly eating outdoors in large numbers, because people intuitively understood that water-constrained conditions made reliable dish sanitation impossible, and plastic cutlery represented a clean, reliable solution that required nothing beyond simply opening the package. Households managing children during sustained crisis conditions, there is an additional, psychological dimension that deserves direct acknowledgement. Maintaining normalcy matters profoundly during prolonged stress. Eating from a plate using a fork, even a plastic disposable one, preserves a degree of familiar routine that supports mental health and reduces anxiety among younger family members. This is not a trivial consideration. Ecological stability affects decision-making quality, interpersonal cooperation, and long-term resilience outcomes for everyone in the group. 2 large count boxes, the 200 to 500 piece variety that typically targets catering or bulk household use. Seal them in waterproof bags immediately after purchase to protect against moisture and contamination. Store one in your kitchen emergency kit and one in your vehicle kit. They are inexpensive, lightweight, require zero maintenance, and represent no meaningful storage burden. They become immediately scarce within hours of a recognized crisis and immediately valuable to anyone managing a group of people without reliable water access. This content is built on documented history, not speculation. If it is useful to you, hit like, subscribe, and share it with someone who thinks preparation is excessive. Seems excessive today, looks rational the morning after. Kiss. Sealed, empty metal paint cans, 5-liter size plastic is everywhere in modern preparedness culture and practical thinking. Bins, jugs, bags, buckets, and storage totes dominate every conversation about emergency storage. And plastic is adequate under stable, controlled conditions with predictable temperature ranges. Under the specific and often extreme stress conditions of extended collapse scenarios, plastic begins to reveal its fundamental limitations in ways that matter for survival. Warps and deforms under sustained heat. It becomes brittle and prone to cracking in extreme cold. Shatters under impact at the worst possible moments. Degrades under prolonged UV exposure in outdoor conditions. Certain plastics interact chemically with fuel and solvent compounds, making them inappropriate for storing some of the most critical survival materials. Metal does not share these failure modes. Empty 5-liter metal paint cans with tight sealing lids represent a storage category that most preppers overlook entirely, often because the association with paint makes them seem purpose-specific. These cans are manufactured specifically to hold liquid solvents and paint products under pressure, in varying temperature conditions during transport and extended storage. That engineering translates directly into exceptional performance for survival applications across a wide range of materials. They can store fuel safely and without permeation risk. They can hold dry goods with complete exclusion of pests and vermin that can compromise plastic containers. They block light and moisture completely, extending the shelf life of anything stored inside. They can serve as cooking vessels over open flame after thorough cleaning and preparation. Can be buried in soil without structural degradation over time. They can be transported in vehicles without leaking or off-gassing under temperature fluctuation. During the severe Beirut fuel crisis of 2021, gasoline rationing became extreme within days of the initial shortage becoming publicly apparent. Citizens who had metal containers could store their allocated fuel safely and transport it without risk. Those relying on improvised plastic containers faced chemical permeation, structural degradation, and spill risks that made storage dangerous. Metal cans became active trade items in neighborhood exchange systems. Clean, well-sealed can have documented practical trade value exceeding theoretical currency in some areas. The opaque nature of sealed metal cans provides an additional tactical advantage that becomes meaningful in community survival or barter contexts. Contents are not visible from the outside. In environments where resources are being traded, assessed, or potentially targeted, that privacy carries genuine protective value for the person holding the container. Item 8. Manual can openers, multiple units. This one seems almost embarrassingly basic when stated plainly. In documented disaster scenarios across multiple countries, on multiple continents, and across multiple types of emergency, it appears repeatedly and consistently on lists of items that affected populations desperately needed and did not have access to. The reason this gap exists is purely psychological and rooted in assumption. People stock canned goods carefully and in quantity. Buy beans, tuna, vegetables, soups, and stews in bulk specifically because canned food represents reliable, shelf-stable nutrition. They feel genuinely prepared when they look at those stacked cans. Then the power goes out. The electric can opener mounted under the cabinet stops functioning, and they realize with uncomfortable clarity that they have no manual alternative to access the food they spent money storing. During extended blackouts and evacuation scenarios across documented disaster history, canned food is the dominant emergency food source precisely because of its shelf stability, caloric density, and minimal preparation requirements. FEMA explicitly recommends manual can openers as essential emergency kit items in its public preparedness materials. Sales data and consistent reports from disaster relief workers show that this item runs out early in emergency retail purchasing waves, as people belatedly recognize the gap in their preparation. The lesson is not simply to own one manual can opener as a backup to electric appliances. The lesson is to own several units distributed across your preparedness infrastructure. They are small enough to fit in a shirt pocket, lightweight enough to add nothing meaningful to a go bag, and inexpensive enough that buying 4 or 5 represents almost no financial burden. Distribute them deliberately, one in the kitchen emergency kit, one in the vehicle kit, one in the go bag, one stored with your long-term food supplies. 9. Beeswax or unscented taper candles in bulk artificial lighting is so thoroughly normalized in contemporary life that most people genuinely cannot conceptualize its sustained absence in any practical way. The first night without power is disorienting and somewhat novel. The third night has become operationally dangerous. People move through dark spaces relying on phone screens that are running out of battery. They trip over familiar furniture. They make decisions driven by anxiety, exhaustion, and the accumulated stress of sensory deprivation in a space that once felt comfortable. Candles address this with elegant simplicity. Perfectly, not as a complete solution to lighting needs, but practically, reliably, and without any infrastructure requirement whatsoever. They require no charging, no batteries, no fuel, no mechanical function, and no connection to any external system. A single taper candle burns for approximately 7 to 9 hours at standard thickness. Case of 100 candles represents 700 to 900 hours of functional ambient light, distributed across weeks of extended emergency conditions. During extended blackouts in Puerto Rico following Hurricane Maria, candles became an active medium of exchange in some neighborhood informal economies, primarily because people lacked food or water in those specific exchanges, but because persistent darkness created compounding safety risks, psychological deterioration, and practical functional limitations that light immediately and tangibly resolved. The psychological relief provided by candlelight in a dark crisis environment is not a luxury consideration. It is a measurable factor in decision-making quality and group cohesion. Bespoke or unscented specification matters significantly for health reasons that become more important in confined spaces. Standard paraffin candles release petrochemical combustion byproducts during burning. In an enclosed space with limited ventilation, which accurately describes most emergency shelter configurations, where windows and doors are sealed for thermal or security reasons, this represents a genuine respiratory hazard over extended periods. Beeswax candles burn substantially cleaner with fewer harmful byproducts. Scented candles avoid the additional chemical load introduced by fragrance compounds. Dry erase markers and laminated information cards. This item is the most unconventional on the list and requires some explanation to appreciate its value. That value, in a collapse scenario, is grounded in direct observation from actual disaster response environments and well-documented community behavior under sustained stress. Communications infrastructure fails, whether through power grid collapse, cellular network overload, or internet disruption. Information management becomes chaotic almost immediately. People do not know where supplies are being distributed or when distribution schedules change. They do not know where medical assistance is available in their area. They do not know which roads remain passable and which are blocked or dangerous. They do not know the current status of water restoration, power grid repair timelines, or evacuation routes. In that information vacuum, the ability to communicate clearly, accurately, and in a rapidly updatable format becomes a genuine community leadership tool. Dry erase markers used on laminated surfaces create rapid, updatable, weather-resistant information posting capability that requires no electricity, no internet connection, and no special skill. Aid workers in documented disaster environments have used laminated cards and laminated printed sheets as field message board because they can be updated continuously in field conditions without additional paper or printing equipment. The information can be changed as situations evolve, preventing the dangerous persistence of outdated guidance that fixed signs or written notes cannot prevent. The cost is genuinely minimal. Quality set of dry erase markers cost approximately $5 at any office supply or general merchandise store. Set of laminated cards or laminated printed sheets can be produced at any print shop for under $10 total. Together, they represent a community communication capability that becomes disproportionately valuable when digital networks are unavailable and accurate information is the scarcest resource in the environment. Item 11. Rubber-sealed wide-mouth glass jars. Glass is heavy relative to plastic. Glass breaks under impact in ways that plastic does not. Facts cause many people to dismiss it as a practical survival storage medium without further consideration. Dismissal is a strategic error that history has repeatedly demonstrated. Mouth glass jars with rubber-sealed lids, specifically the type used for home canning and food preservation over multiple seasons, represent the most chemically stable, pest-proof, and vermin-resistant storage option available to civilian preppers at accessible price points. Like plastic containers, glass does not absorb chemical odors from previous contents or leach compounds into stored food over extended time periods. Unlike metal containers, it is transparent, allowing immediate visual inventory assessment without opening the seal and compromising the stored contents. Unlike soft containers of any material, it is structurally rigid and resistant to compression damage from stacking weight. For long-term dry goods storage covering seeds, whole grains, legumes, salt, sugar, dried herbs, and spices, properly sealed glass jars are unmatched by most alternatives at comparable or even significantly higher price points. Sealed correctly with rubber gaskets and processed properly, they prevent moisture infiltration, oxygen degradation, and pest access with remarkable reliability over years of storage. In documented economic collapse scenarios including Argentina's severe economic crisis of the early 2000s and parts of the former Soviet bloc's difficult transition period, glass preservation jars were among the most actively and consistently traded household goods in informal markets. Families who possessed the means to preserve produce from small garden plots used jars to extend food value across seasons and trade surpluses for other necessities. Those without adequate jar supplies were dependent on whatever external distribution existed, which was frequently unreliable and insufficient.